The Brain Truth with Allison Jordan. Prepare, renew, reclaim. And now your host, Allison Jordan.
Hey, Brain Jones. Hi, Brain Jones. Happy New Year. Oh my God. Happy New Year. We are in 2022. And guess what? It's somebody's birthday tomorrow. This girl. Happy birthday to me. Anyway, we are at episode 2.1 with The Brain Truth with Allison Jordan on intellectualradio.com and iHeartRadio station. You can hear us on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes, and now we're streaming live from YouTube and I think Facebook by another back door. And we're going to be on 107.3 VIP really soon. So we're very excited about that. So anyway, I just wanted to say, you guys, it's going to be a really important show tonight. Some really cool conversations about something that's very profound. So if you want to call in, I've got my handy dandy phone. I'm glad that I mentioned about the phone because I had to plug it in. It wasn't even charged. But the number is 708-545-2446. I'm going to give that number again. It should be, I don't know if it's going to come through the bottom, but 708-545-2446. Please, if you guys want to call in with any questions or comment when our guests come on the show, we will welcome any phone call. So anybody who's watching, please call in. Okay. So anyway, let's get into the sponsors. So who are some of our incredible sponsors? Swabs and Swirls is our COVID testing company. Pretty 12 Cosmetics, NAMI South Suburbs, River Edge Hospital, Epic Arts and Entertainment, Patch Party Club, and Brain Truth Wakana, D-Champs, and the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So if you want to be a sponsor on our show, here is a way you can be a sponsor. Here are some of our incredible sponsorship opportunities. We have the Pink Truth Buster, the Red Truth Buster, and the Purple Truth Buster packages. Please go to our website at www.thebraintruth.com. That's www.thebraintruth.com. We need some more sponsors. We are growing, we're expanding, we're doing a lot of amazing things, and we cannot continue to do the work that we do without the support of the sponsors. So please, everybody, like if you're watching, I wanted to bring we got a sponsor from one of our listeners and one of our viewers. Her name is Sheila Pugh, and she wrote us a card to the Brain Truth. I'll show it next week. And she sent us a money order, and she went on Facebook. She doesn't even go on Facebook, but somehow she was able to go on Facebook and just see if we got it. And I just want to say thank you. I know you're one of our most valued listeners. We also got a donation from Rhonda Simone for Claudia's foundation. So I did receive that via Cash App. So any donation you may have, we also have a Cash App. That's Cash App, The Brain Truth, the little money sign, The Brain Truth, or you can go to our website again at thebraintruth.com. Okay. I think I covered all of that. We have a new segment this new year, and we're calling this segment the Brief Brain Buzz. And so the Brief Brain Buzz is a new segment we're adding to the Brain Truth, where we address mental health issues in current news and pop culture. So I basically, this was really touching when I saw this story, and it really hit home because we need to start talking about pop culture. We need to start talking about the entertainment industry. We do a lot of stuff here at the Brain Truth where we do help a lot of individuals. We do talk to many individuals brave enough to come on this platform. But we also are well aware that mental illness is just a global pandemic. And so now, since we were in the COVID era, we are experiencing a lot of different kind of mental illness, anxiety, depression. So here at the Brain Buzz, we just kind of want to talk about what's going on around the world. This week's Brain Buzz was really kind of sad. We want to bring prayers out to the legendary singer, Sinead O'Connor, whose son, his name was Shane O'Connor. He was 17 years old, who was found dead after he disappeared last week. Shane O'Connor had apparently been on suicide watch at a hospital in Dublin, and he actually died by suicide. According to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. In 2019, adolescents and young adults aged 15 to 24 had a suicide rate of 13.95%. As a parent, you can approach suicide prevention in the same way you would any other safety health issues for your children. By educating yourself, you can learn what put kids at risk for suicide and what protects them the most. For more information about suicide prevention, you can log on to one of our major sponsors, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. That website is www.afsp.org. www.afsp.org. Okay, let's go on to our disclaimer. The Brain Truth does not serve the purpose of providing medical treatment or therapy services, diagnosis, prevention, or cure for any physical, mental, or emotional issue, disease, or condition. As a member of our audience, you agree that the Brain Truth does not assume liability for any physical or mental disease, condition, or issue, or any other type of loss or damage due to any information shared on our broadcast. So today is National Human Trafficking Awareness Day. Human trafficking is the second largest and fastest form of organized crime. I did some research and looking, and it says assessing the full scope of human trafficking is difficult. And we're going to be talking to some people that can help give us some insight. It's difficult because so many cases often go undetected. Something in the United Nations refers to as the hidden figure of crime. However, it's estimated that internationally, there are between 20 million and 40 million people in modern slavery today. The U.S. State Department says over 20,000 individuals are trafficked in the United States every year. So I want to bring on an incredible organization that is just dedicated and advocates for human trafficking. We're honored to have two of these people from Restoration 61 here with us tonight. Restoration 61 empowers individuals who have been exploited through sex trafficking to lead lives of hope and freedom. Their vision is to respond to the crisis of domestic sex trafficking by providing resources to victims through outreach and emergency housing and restorative services while addressing the issue of demand and ending exploitation through education and advocacy. So joining us, and you guys are already here, hi, is Lakeisha Smith and Chloe Waters. So Lakeisha Smith, raise your hand. Who's Lakeisha? Okay, Lakeisha, an awareness and education advocate at Restoration 61, who works to inform local communities of Chicago about human trafficking and exploitation. Lakeisha's heart is to prevent victimization and educate future generations on how to identify the signs of trafficking. Welcome, Lakeisha. And then we have Chloe Waters, is also joining us. She's the Director of Awareness at Restoration 61. Chloe Waters is a speaker, writer, and creative who effectively uses her own story of sexual abuse and exploitation to provide communities with the tools to fight against human trafficking. She currently leads the awareness education team at Restoration 61, which focuses on building diverse relationships within communities to make them a safer, stronger, and more resourceful environment for survivors of exploitation to thrive. Hi, ladies. Wow.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for having us on.
You know, I started doing this research. I know a little bit about it. You'll see later on the show that my son was in a movie and he filmed it about human trafficking. We spent about 4 months down in Flint, Michigan. And so when you really start to like research it and see the statistics, it is astounding. And for you guys to do this every day and make this your advocacy, your life, I want to say on behalf of the Brain Truth and everyone watching, thank you. First of all, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. What is human trafficking? Let's just start there. What is it? Anybody want to take a stab at what human trafficking is in a sentence?
Well, first, I want to thank you for allowing us to be on this show. So thank you, Allison. And so to answer your question, human trafficking is really the practice of transporting people from one place to another for the purpose of forced labor or sexual exploitation. And usually it encompasses force, fraud, or coercion. And so, I mean, that's a technical definition. And the way I like to break it down is human trafficking. There's two parts. There's labor trafficking, there's sex trafficking, and oftentimes they intersect. But usually it's someone being forced to do something that they don't want to do.
against their will. I
Mhm.
read also, which was mind blowing, that people are trafficked, like you said, for sexual exploitation, forced labor, which you said, forced begging, forced marriage. Children are also sold as sex slaves and child soldiers, while adults are trafficked for organ harvesting.
Yeah. I mean, human trafficking, it's $150 billion global industry. And there are, I want to say, don't quote me on this, but I want to say that there are over 30 different subcategories of human trafficking. And in
Okay.
that, you have debt bondage, you have sextortion, which is usually dealing with the online coercion
Right.
of people and even children nowadays. So there is a lot under the that umbrella. And they all kind of tie into exploitation, right? It all involves the exploitation of another individual. So it is multifaceted.
It's disgusting.
Mhm.
It's called a thing. It is disgusting. And when you think about human trafficking, it angers me. It breaks my heart, because you think about all these kids and all these people that are missing, and you can probably assume, based on the statistic, that that is primarily what's going on, right? I mean, Lakeisha, tell me why and how you do this every day. What brought you to this as
Yes.
your lifelong career? Like, I don't know if I could, like, I know that everybody has, I went on you guys' website and I wanted to read it tonight. I got chills when I read the story about the kid walking along the beach. And it's the story of throwing the starfish, right? Or was it the starfish story? It's on your website. And some old man came by and he was like, well, there's hundreds of thousands of starfish and you're pouring them back in the ocean. And a little boy said, he threw one and he goes, I just saved that one life. And if it just takes one life to save, you guys are doing what God has assigned you to do. So Lakeisha, tell me why you're doing this, and how many starfish have you saved, and what is this, what are you doing, how are you doing it, and give me the depth of what this actually looks like.
Well, I mean, it's very personal to me because I have a heart to help others. And seeing that traffickers, um, basically go off the vulnerabilities of people
Mm,
within their communities. It's like you can see somebody off the street and see that they deal with rejection or that they're hungry.
wow.
And they feed on that. So, but this initially started actually with our founders, Kara and Paul, in
Okay.
2015. So they initially were attending a summit on human trafficking, I believe it was in Kansas. And Kara began doing some research on human trafficking just within her region. And she actually used to be a former middle school teacher. So what she realized was that the very students that she had been pouring her life into were the same ages of those who were being
Mm.
targeted by traffickers. Like, to me, that would be mind blowing. I've worked with students from K through 5, and if I to find out that the students I'm working with or the people that are being trafficked are around the age of the students that I'm working with, it just breaks your heart.
So people who are trafficking the kids are like right in front of you,
Yeah, it's like right in
like
front of you, and you don't even know it. And so
teachers, and like, I know there was somebody said something like when you go to Walmart, like they'll put something on your windshield or something. Have you ever heard that?
listen,
And like
it's a
a
little bit of
jacket, and
everything.
then you jump out of your car to like take something off your windshield, and someone in a van, like, I don't know if that's
Yeah.
just dramatic, but
Well,
they said that's what they do.
that could be a gang initiation too. But there are different ways to be trafficked. Like I said,
Yeah.
with Paul and Kara, I think the biggest thing was that they found out that Illinois had the largest numbers when it came to trafficking out of all 50
So
states.
it does? Illinois? Really? I
Yes.
didn't know that. Because, when
It's
you think about human trafficking, you always think like it happens over there. Like,
no.
when we did the movie, I always saw human trafficking was like something in China or something in some foreign country.
Mhm.
And then when I was in Flint, Michigan, and I started seeing, we did a scene in the movie where they actually were at a hotel and they reenacted a scene of people that had gotten rescued in this hotel, and it was like a 4-year-old little girl. And the end of the movie, they had a 4-year-old little girl holding a teddy bear, and it was 7 men in the room with her. And they go to truck stops. And so there's a scene where they park. That's real. And they have like the men in one truck, the kids in another, and they go out of the truck. They pick who they want, and they go in this other truck, open it up, go in there. And I mean, that wasn't just movie magic. That's real.
No, but I also want to bring it home too, is that just I think sometimes we, like you said, we think it happens over there.
Yeah.
We don't really pay attention to what's happening over here. It's easy to spot if you see somebody dragging somebody into a van. We already heard about the white van with the windows type of thing.
Every time I see a white van, I freak out. We could be the cable man. I'm like, I don't know about that. You work for the cable company? Seriously.
Right. It's like every time you see a white van, your anxiety gets high. But the thing about it is like, but you're not thinking about the kids who are airdropping sex photos to each other. That's exploitation. You're not thinking about the guy that just drove up to, we don't like to say prostitute, we like to say worker, to get, pleased. We don't think about that. Obviously, if you were get caught picking up somebody off the street, the police, you think the police probably just give you a tap on the hand, but it's like, no, this is a crime. And we actually do outreaches where we actually drive around Chicago and you see this stuff happening. It is mind-blowing.
Yeah. So tell me, Chloe, what does Restoration 61 do? Like, what is a typical, I mean, in my mind, I think you guys have on like, capes and because you should capes and like your superheroes, and you're out there like helping our people. But what do you guys do exactly?
Yeah, I think that's the normal response every time you tell somebody that you work in anti-trafficking. They think you're jumping into buildings, pulling babies out of cages, and that's not really the case. So Restoration 61, what we do is we pretty much meet with victims at the time of their disclosure, and we start creating a game plan for them, helping them create a game plan. And similar to what Lakeisha said, human trafficking is so much more subtle than some of the extreme cases that we hear, because we have to take into account the vulnerabilities, the previous forms of trauma in their history. And so most of the time, the victims that we're working with, this was not the life that they ever dreamed of. But we typically, like I said, we work with them at the time of their disclosure, and we work with adults primarily. And we actually just recently expanded our organization to serve all victims of human trafficking, not just victims of sex trafficking, and not just women, because that's another common misconception, is that most victims, or that all victims, are women, which is not the case at all. We see victims of human trafficking who are men, who are boys,
who's most at risk, though? I always think children, but who's most at risk for being trafficked?
There's a couple factors. I would say definitely, right? The average age of entry right now. The last study that came out was in 2015, and so the average age of entry is about 15 years old. So children are completely at risk of being trafficked. But then you want to look at what makes people disproportionately at risk, right? And so we have things like homelessness. 95% of the victims that we work with do report being homeless. So you have that factor. You have the communities that they're in, right? That's a risk of being
and it's in more rural, right? Or I thought I saw somebody say where? Urban, or where
it's
are they?
It's everywhere. The way human trafficking more or less operates, or so its system, it differs depending on the region that you're in, right? And human trafficking is running rampant in Chicago, even in our urban areas, just as much as it's very prevalent in rural areas. It just looks a little differently. And so in addition to homelessness, when we look at those disproportional things that make or children disproportionately at risk, we look at what traumas are they experiencing right now? Do they have both parents at home? Are they in the foster
Mm,
care system, right? All of these things can make a child more vulnerable. Have they been neglected? Does that mean that they're looking for attention or a friend or just someone that they can trust? And so when we talk
right.
about the subtleness of human trafficking, we have to explore the question of or the concept of love and what is
Mm,
love, because most of what we see oftentimes is trauma bonding with victims.
yes.
And so then I have to ask, well, why does this exist in the first place? And and the genesis of it usually starts with the trust and the facade of love that might be present in
Wow.
this person's life. And that goes alongside not just children, but adults as well, because we all have a different set of needs. So, I mean, I can continue talking all day about
But
who's
I
at
mean,
risk and what they look like.
it's really deep because with social media and kids talking, it's got to be a surge because now they can really prey on you. Like they post something like "I hate my mom," or "I'm not doing," and then boom, they go in for the kill there, literally. You know
Mhm,
what I mean? Um,
mhm.
Out of the sex trafficking, so you guys work with people that rescue the kids or with agencies that actually capture or rescue the kids, and then you assess them from a mental standpoint, right, and kind of for reentry back into either going home, or how does is that what I'm understanding, or?
So it works a little differently in Northern Illinois. We actually
Mhm.
only work with adults, and the reason why we
Okay.
work with adults is because they are often overlooked. They're an overlooked population.
Yeah, I saw
Um,
something where it said some people actually force themselves. They make a choice to be trafficked.
and we call that survival sex. So
Yeah.
even when we talk about homelessness, right, we look
Okay.
at the factors that go along with survival. And sometimes you have a surge of people who are homeless. Sometimes they're introduced to this lifestyle by someone else. And so they engage in survival sex. And although we might, or you know, people might look at that, or society might look at that, oh, well, that person is willing to do it because they are consenting to that. But are they really? Or are they just trying to survive and fend for their
Yeah,
needs, right?
that's
So we
scary.
have that. In Northern Illinois, we work with adult victims of human trafficking. And most of the time, we are introduced to our new clients either through law enforcement. We have some relationships built with law enforcement and with other agencies. And so oftentimes we'll get referrals from them. So that's usually how we're introduced to them. And in Southern Illinois, because the regions are more rural in nature, there
Mhm.
aren't as many resources available either in those areas. So we do work with um, children of human trafficking,
So when they
victims who are
arrive,
children.
Lakeisha, when they arrive, I mean,
Mhm.
I don't want to make this sound insensitive, but what are you really looking at? What are you facing? Like, I mean, from a physical and a mental standpoint, I mean, what are some of the stories that happen? What can you talk about that?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. I think one of the things that I see the most is the brokenness.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter the age or the color. Um, and some of them are really, I don't want to say like dolled up, but they don't look homeless. Some of them don't look like what we see on TV. We're looking for like somebody who just look like they just injected drugs and
Right.
maybe look high and stuff like that. And that's not always what it looks like, you know. And honestly, it's just you don't judge. Um, Traffic victims just come in all shapes and sizes, and when you see them, you really just want to help them, which is why I'm glad we do case management with them. We do crisis intervention with them. If someone's been recently raped, we actually go
Mm.
into the hospital with them, and serve as an advocate for them.
Mhm.
So just really being present, being there, listening, because the details matter. A lot of things that they tell us actually help us, to be able to help them, and that's not just with finding housing, but if they are on a substance and they're abusing that substance, then we can get them assistance. And
Mhm.
that's where my job comes in, is building those partnerships so that we can have emergency housing for them, so that we can get them into places that can help rehabilitate them, you know. And I
Are
think
they coming already on drugs, or when they were trafficked,
some,
were they given drugs?
a lot of them are given drugs once they've been trafficked. A lot of them
Oh,
aren't on drugs already, but once
oh
they
my
are,
God.
it's like they're hooked. And so it becomes a life of just trying to survive. To be honest with you, like not all of them are what we may think as uneducated. Some of them are. Some of them have degrees, you know, and are very well kept, very beautiful women, you know. So I
Wow.
just want to basically
Woo.
just put that across, that it's not always what you see on the TV. You know, I watch SVU,
Right.
I watch the crime shows, and I enjoy them, but it's not what you always see.
Like give me some scenarios, like on a dating app, and I just go out and have dinner
Yeah,
with a nice man who says he's an attorney, whatever, and he's like,
like,
oh, let's go
so
somewhere and
this
have
is
a
gonna
drink. Like
sound funny.
anything?
This is gonna sound funny, but do you
Okay.
know there's a sugar baby conference?
No. What's that?
Yeah,
What's a sugar
they
baby? What
actually
is that?
they actually have conferences. Chloe, don't laugh at me. They actually have these conferences. It was mind blowing to me because it was just
Okay.
like, wow, this is a lifestyle. And it's not necessarily that they look at it as trafficking. It's just, oh, I'm just showing off this body or spending this, you know, time with this person.
But
And
what's a
it's
sugar
for
baby? I
money.
mean, what does that mean? Like,
So
what's a sugar?
that's when a younger person seeks
Uh-huh.
out an older individual for money. So if I'm, you know, in my
Oh, the
20s
opposite of a sugar daddy. A
exactly. So
sugar
but the sugar babies are
baby.
mostly like broke college students, you know,
Okay. And so
or
they have a
let's say
conference and they are looking for somebody to take care of them, and then they end up. Oh,
they actually teach you how to be a sugar baby. So
sure.
what the world is coming to today is
Oh
like
my
it's more of an
goodness.
acceptance of
Ye-
I don't want to mention any, you know, names of websites on here, but there's a recently popular website where people, you know, pay money for someone to take pictures of their feet, you know, or certain parts of their body, and they're making good money. It's still exploitation.
Yeah, it was. They said the average age of a sex trafficked child is 13 to 14 years old, and a pimp, I guess they call him pimp, can make up to 150 to $200,000 per child a year.
Mhm.
So
And
1 in 3 children who run away from home are approached by a trafficker within 48 hours of their running away. 48 hours.
yeah. Um, and some of those stats have changed a little bit because there's been a lot of work being done. When I first came into this field, the average age of entry was between 12 to 13. And
Wow.
so now that has been raised. Now it's between 14 to 15.
Mhm.
Not that that's still any better, right? We're still talking
Right.
about our children. And I want to kind of go back a little bit because you asked the question, what does it look like when we meet with
Yeah.
victims of human trafficking? And I think sometimes the common misconception is that victims of human trafficking identify that they're victims, and secondly, want to receive help oftentimes. And so there's a lot of factors that go alongside it. But oftentimes when we're first meeting with a victim, all we're trying to do is build a relationship with them and get them to see that there is something better and that they can get out of this lifestyle. But oftentimes, like a day in the life of an advocate that is doing victim services,
Uh-huh.
it's tough because you're working with human beings who have been exposed to a lot of trauma. Sometimes mental health plays a factor.
Right.
Sometimes that substance abuse is present. Like Lakeisha said, many times they're not entering in with an addiction, but I can't tell you the amount of women that I've spoken to that said, I literally could not do this work without taking something.
Wow.
Um, because they can see up to 40 clients in a day.
Wait a minute.
And
Wait,
mhm,
they have sex with 40 clients in one day. Okay,
yes,
so
up to 40.
oh, okay. Whew, wait a minute. All right.
Mhm.
So they get trafficked. How do they find them? So there's an advocacy people or FBI, I don't know what agency, you guys got to tell me. They find them. they rescue them. What happens to the traffickers? Do they ever find them? Because they say that they go underground. And then how come this is not on the news every day? How come, where are these traffickers? Because they keep doing it. And then you get this kid, where do they go first? They take them to the hospital, or you meet them somewhere? I mean, I like to know like how this goes down. Like literally
low risk, high reward. And that goes along in a couple of different ways. So when we talk about traffickers and pimps, right? Because we normally know them as pimps. Normally there's a ring, and those are referred to as trafficking rings. So a trafficker will typically have anywhere between 5 to maybe 10 individuals that they're trafficking at one time. I mean, depending on the trafficker, there's some that have more, there's some that have less. I've seen some that have 1 or 2, but that's on average 5 to 10. Now, of the people that they are trafficking, there's usually one, which is often referred to as the bottom, who is that trafficker's right hand, and usually is a victim themselves. But what we see is that person kind of acts under the role of a recruiter, so they're responsible for bringing in more victims, and kind of managing the people that we have there. So kind of in real world, right? You have your manager, you have the supervisor,
just like
you have
a
your
real
regional
organizational
manager.
chart.
It
like
is
a real corporation.
100%. And
so somebody right now walking around Walmart, or the people out there just looking for somebody to look the wrong way, be vulnerable, just anywhere. They're everywhere. I can be just assured. If you're talking about 20, 40 million people, they're everywhere, right?
They're everywhere. 100%.
What are the signs? Do you know the signs of a trafficker? Like, I know they're lurking. I mean, I figured they'd be lurking like this, but they just look like us, right? Or
they do. There's so many stories that I can pull on. And sometimes it's hard because you're absolutely right. Traffickers, buyers, they look just like us. So it's kind of hard to tell at times. And the vulnerabilities that person may be having in that season of their lives really impact what a person who's trying to exploit them can do. But signs of a trafficker, I always say, if it sounds too good to be true, baby girl, it's too good to be true, good, right? And that's specifically to kids, but someone who's being too nice, someone who's overly generous, someone who seems like, I mean, I have to bring up intuition here, because we all have some kind of intuition. So sometimes if it seems off, I would always lean into that. But we typically see 2 types of traffickers. So there's a Romeo trafficker, who is very romantic, he lures you in, and you're deeply invested in this love, right, or in this relationship. And then there's a gorilla pimp, which we know them to be more violent in nature, more aggressive. But what usually a trafficker is that they're both. They will lure you in
and beat you up,
and then switch up once you're invested. Yeah.
He worked on her for months and months. I mean, they did kind of do a great job in outlining. Nicole Bowers Wallace, who was the director and hands-on, we'll show a little clip, but later. But I did get to see the grooming and everything. So Chloe, I know somewhere in there I read about your own mental illness or mental health story, correct?
My sexual abuse story. So growing up.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to share, but I was just like, how, I'm sure that comes from a place of like, you can relate, but how are you doing, in this space because of your own journey? If you want to talk about it, hey, we're at the Brain Truth, and maybe someone else.
Yeah, I'll make it brief. I usually always share my story with kids, usually if I'm doing anything preventative. And I like to always come off of the angle of just judgment, because a lot of things we see, we judge, and they're not you know, we those judgments aren't always accurate. So I was a typical kid, grew up with my mom. I grew up with my mom and my stepdad in Brooklyn, and I had been sexually abused for a long time from a really young age by several men. And so there was already somewhat of a grooming process there, because when you're sexually abused as a child, that is a norm for you, right? You don't understand that isn't actually happening in other homes. And so you grow up to be just more sexually adept, um, in layman's terms. And what I didn't know until I was a lot older was that my mom was also being exploited by my stepdad. So my
Wow.
stepdad was he was a drug dealer. He was also a trafficker. And to me, they just left in the middle of the night and they would just come back home. And that was just normal to me. But it wasn't until I was in my 20s till I realized, till I was in this field, till I was able to say, oh my goodness, my mom was being exploited. And when she left him, I was about 10, between 10, 11 years old. And I mean, I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, and we didn't always have a lot. And so by the time I was about 11, 12, my mom would kind of work with clients in our own home. And sometimes I would
Clients,
just
you mean
manage her
other, what do you mean clients? Other kids or other?
No. So she was engaging in survival sex at that point, right? To make
Wow.
money for us, to make ends
Clients.
meet.
I get it.
Mhm.
Man, got it. Okay.
So sometimes I would manage her schedule.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and at that point, I at 13, she was gone for some time, and I was raped by one of her clients.
Wow.
And from that point forward, I was just like, you know what? I'm done. Like, all men want is, they just want to continue to take this from me. So I'm just going to give it. Right. And so I spiraled down a path of what what we would all call, like I always tell kids, like, if I ask you who's the hoe in your school, all kids will raise their hand. Right. And so I would say that I was probably that person when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. But what people didn't see was that most of my life I was a good student, but no one begged to ask the question of, okay, what might be going on? What's going on behind the scenes, right? So we're quick to judge. And even teachers, counselors, sometimes, and I still see it till this day, which is pretty sad, we will, just say, oh, they just hanging around the wrong crowd, or they're just at that age, or there's all of these justifications and validations for why a kid may be behaving a certain way, without truly exploring what might be happening under the surface. And
so what happened to the man? What happened to the mama's man? Is he under the jail? Did he get electrocuted? Where is he?
I don't know where. I don't know where
he didn't get arrested. He didn't.
No, I never reported. And I think that's another thing that we probably need to talk about, right? Is a lot of these cases go underreported. I never reported because I was a smart kid. I knew that if I did make a report, then the question would be, where's your mom? Right. Exactly. And then my mom would then have to maybe do some time for that. Right. And then I'd be taken away and sent somewhere else. And so when we think of children and this average age of entry into trafficking, we have to look at everything that's happening in their lives. Some of them don't have parents, but some of them do. Exactly. Some of them have siblings. All of those things are used against them.
Yes.
When someone is trying to take advantage of them. So we just have to be better at asking questions, and also understanding that a lot of these cases are underreported. So we have these numbers, and it's why I hate statistics, because they're not true numbers of what we're dealing with, because the amount of people that I have worked with in my life, that have actually reported, is very, very small in comparison to the amount of people I've worked with who have not reported. So
Well, Chloe,
Yeah,
I
that's a long
appreciate
story,
it.
but yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing that story. It gives context, to how passionate you are about helping other people, and just you saying it, just normalizing that conversation. We hope that some of the young people that you are saving are going to be brave enough to join in this fight and help someone else. Lakeisha, what are we going to do? I mean, how do we stop it? Can we stop it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things that we're currently working on. Like I said, one of the things is case management, being an advocate so that these victims have a voice. Um, crisis intervention. That's whether we're going out to do an outreach and we're giving out hope bags. And, we place our number in the middle of these hope bags. We actually just did a 21 days of giving where people actually, brought in donations or went through Amazon Smile to give things that go in the hope bags. And they mean a lot. They go, we fill them like with feminine products,
Wow.
makeup and just different things, like even just a little sucker. A lot of things that the women can't get on their own. Feminine products are expensive these days. So just even having that bag, may give us a couple of minutes to have a conversation with them. And that can be just that one conversation might be enough for them to say, you know what, I want to get out this life. What can I do? And
Okay.
that's actually what happened with me. We actually did an outreach and we drove around and we had some young ladies that we saw, and their pimp was literally across the street watching us give them bags. And as long as they're not, you don't have clients coming through, they won't interrupt you if you're talking to them, long as you're not spending too much time with them, because time is money. So actually we saw a young lady, we gave her a bag as well. And she seemed like something was troubling her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we literally just did like, we gave her the bag and everything and just told her to give us a call, when she was ready. And we literally did a lap like around the block, and we actually saw her again. And she said, you know what? I want to come in. She was like, I literally prayed about this morning. And that was something that touched my heart, because it was like, God hears our prayers.
Yeah.
Literally praying for a way out this morning. And when she saw us pull up, and us give her that bag, I don't know if she realized at that moment that that was hope, literally pulling up with her.
Wow.
When we made that drive around the block and came
Woo.
around, just to see her there and to see her say, you know what, like, I think this is what I prayed for. Like, can you
Mm.
help me? To get her off the streets that day, like, I cried,
I can
because
imagine.
it's
I know
it's
you go home. I mean, I can't,
well, one of the things I'm working on is my heart is really in prevention. I really like working with the kids.
yeah.
So I'm hoping that we can, have a department where we can work with children and work in prevention. Um, I was a victim of domestic violence and sexual assault.
Mm,
And I really believe that it wasn't just due to the trauma of having divorced parents and,
right.
um, you know, going to one living with, because actually my dad had custody of me and
Mm,
actually visiting with my mom. But it was just a lack of identity, being raised by a military father. You don't really know your identity as a woman,
right.
being raised by a man. And so just not judging.
Yes.
As soon as they say yes, pull them in, you know.
And I visualize that, like like I visual while you were saying the story. Do you ever
Mm.
get scared though? Like they're gonna come after you or the traffickers? I'm
Oh,
sure they don't like y'all. I mean, do you fear? Like, I mean, seriously, you guys
yeah.
are taking away their $150,000, $200,000. I mean,
And actually, sometimes it's more. There's some women that make $1,500 an
so
hour.
you guys are fearless. Like y'all, like, look. I
I
mean,
won't say that, but I will say that Restoration 61 is probably the first, um, company that I've partnered with that actually pray. And,
wow.
we cover
Woo!
ourselves with the blood of Jesus. And that's huge for me. That gives me a peace of mind. It takes away that anxiety, because it's
You're
I'm
being led
really,
by something greater.
yeah, God has allowed me
Wow.
to go into very stressful situations and I have so much clarity of thought.
Wow.
That some people think is scary. They're like, that person just had a knife at you. You didn't even blink. Like,
Are you serious? So you've had some situations like
yeah,
where you had a knife, like somebody was threatening your life because you're saving.
yeah.
Well, okay, so I'm just my head. Just feel like it's getting
But you
tight.
know what? I
This
think
is
in
a
that
lot.
moment, in
Yeah.
that moment, because it was like me protecting a child, something just rises up in you.
Yes.
And I'm not suggesting that anyone do this. Please call law enforcement. And we have
Right.
a
You're
national
saying what
human
God has
trafficking
assigned
hotline.
to you. This is your
Yeah.
assignment. So I want to pivot because I want to bring in our in-house psychiatrist, Dr. Gettings, because we do want to start talking about the clinical perspective and the mental impact that these kids have. So I want to bring on Dr. Gettings, who's one of our brain gang. She's one of we have the whole brain gang. And we often bring some of our brain gang members who's in the field working like yourself that can sort of give a clinical perspective on this whole human trafficking and your own walk. Dr. Gettings, welcome to the show. Here's Lakeisha and Chloe watching. What are your thoughts? Are you just back there just like me? Like,
well, look, I've been backstage listening for sure. And first, I just want to thank Chloe and Lakeisha for speaking tonight. And both of you all obviously are spot on with some of the major points as it relates to this topic as a whole. I'm a child psychiatrist and I'm also an adult psychiatrist. So I've heard things about prevention, and prevention is so key. And when we talk about home life and upbringing, what we're exposed to in childhood, how that dictates the decisions that we make later on in life, especially when we are exposed to predators, which is what we're talking about, right? There are predators in our society, and what makes
predators?
Yeah, what makes certain people vulnerable to predators, and how can we help to decrease that vulnerability? The first time that I came across human trafficking was as a child and adolescent fellow at the University of Illinois, where I worked on an inpatient unit for individuals that are in foster care. And you all already mentioned one of the major risk factors, which is homelessness. And a lot of our children in DCFS are homeless and are very vulnerable. And they unfortunately meet a lot of these predators. And so it was a huge eye opener for me. But just working with individuals on a daily basis. And I am originally from Chicago, but recently relocated to Florida, and didn't even think about how being in Florida was going to really change my understanding and awareness when it comes to human trafficking, because in this state, the numbers are high, they are growing. And I am also working in an integrated behavioral health program within a family medicine practice in Broward. Wow. So in that practice, our job is really to identify these individuals and make sure that we're providing them with resources. I see a lot of women who come into this country with very little and end up trafficked, end up asking for help and asking for guidance in terms of getting away from these predators. So I think just listening to the conversation and making sure that people know, like you said, Allison, why is this not on the news? And when you said that, I went right back to other things that we don't hear about on the news: suicide, just things that happen every day that are true epidemics, and they don't get the attention that they need in order for us to decrease these numbers. So I think it's
prevention. Go back to that prevention word, because that's key. Because Lakeisha tapped in and you said it. Prevention. I mean, like anybody right now is watching this, whoever's watching this, I don't know. Oh, hey, Rhonda. I was like, where is everybody? Prevention. I'm sorry. If you go to the pediatrician's office, why is this part of your health assessment? If you're in class, why is this part of the curriculum? If you're in church, why is this part of the sermon? Why is this part of the church? Like, if this is at the numbers that you're saying, and they're right now walking through Walmart and wherever you are, like you said, right in front of you, Lakeisha, what the heck? Why am we just talking about this like every dang day? Like
I'm so glad you
get riled up. I'm getting riled up. Usually, Dr. Gettings that be yelling over me.
Listen, I'm so glad you asked that, and that's the one thing I love about my job is I serve in my church, and
Yeah.
I help with a couple churches actually.
What's your church, girl? What's your church? My
So
mama a pastor. What's your church?
right. So I go to Manifest Church, but I actually got a lot of teaching at Crusaders Church, and a lot of people
Oh,
know.
Crusaders Church. I've been there.
Mhm.
Of course. Oh, that's a y'all
And I got a
live.
lot of training.
Y'all
from
are live
Crusaders.
in that church. It's like a
Yes.
party.
Listen, it is a party,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
Flags
yeah.
it all.
Okay. Okay.
And the one thing that we were trained as altar workers is to assess a situation that you may come to me and say, "Hey, I'll pray for me because I need more money." But and now I will pray for that. You know,
Right.
God increase, provide. But at the same time, the Holy Spirit can give me something and say, "But this person is actually feeling rejection, and I want you to pray for peace."
Yeah.
And that's nice and dandy. But when I'm
Right.
praying for you and you're telling me that you're homeless and I'm hearing your stomach growl, it bothers me to hug you and say God loves you and then turn you away. And I know the church can only do so much, but this is a part of my job that I love. Is that I get to partner with churches and other organizations that say, hey, while you guys are praying for them, we have a shelter over here.
Amen.
Or we have a food pantry over here. Or we have
Keisha, I'm
donations
getting
of clothes over
chills.
here. Or, when somebody wants to get their first apartment, we have a warehouse that we partner with that can help furnish your first apartment. So it's meeting, and this is my heart, is to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And so it's not enough to just praise somebody up and encourage them and give them hope, but we have to meet a need. And we have to do that by partnering together. So that's why I reach out to different organizations. And say, hey, this is what we do. What do you do that can help us help these victims? Okay.
Do you know, not to cut you off, do you know Inglewood Barbie? Have you ever heard of her?
Inglewood
Girl, you need to go on her Facebook page tonight when we're done. And I don't know why I had to bring this up, because guys just moving. She has a young 16-year-old girl that she's been talking about for the last couple of days. That they call it Club 51, Club 61. I don't know. She goes under the underpass and she
the viaduct. Yeah,
the viaduct. Where is that exactly? It's somewhere in Inglewood, right?
I think she goes to different sites, but I'm not 100% sure. But it is
6,
Club 51, and
51.
Her name is Inglewood Barbie. Her real name is Aleta, Aleta.
Okay, so she goes and she feeds the homeless people. I think Chance the Rapper gave her some money, and she's down there. But she, out of her own pocket, she cooks food, hot meals, and brings it and sleeps out there with them. She's not scared of nothing, nobody. And the other day she put on Facebook, because it was a 16-year-old young girl who had run away from home. And she called, she put it on Facebook. Everybody saw, call this hotline. And she couldn't find her anywhere to go. And the girl's vulnerable, walking the streets. And she just held her like, I don't want to leave my eyes off of this girl. But she's still on the streets right now. This is somebody that I'm fearing, even though I ain't going with Barbie, but she's all over the place. Like, how it just was like she don't have nowhere for this little girl to go.
So
and I say on there, I
don't mean to cut you off. I would say don't intervene. That's one thing that we try to tell people. Don't try to be Superman. Don't do it. Leave that to professionals. Call 911. There's also a resource.
That's what everybody was telling her. Call 911.
There's also a resource. So if you dial 311, they'll actually take your information down, and they'll actually either direct you to a shelter. And one of the shelters I actually worked with in Hammond, Indiana, what they would do is once you call them, they would do an intake with you. The first question we ask is, are you safe? Like, are you in a safe place? Because you might not be in a safe place where you can speak. There was actually a young woman who called 911 and disguised it as placing a pizza order. And thankfully, the guy was paying attention.
Wow.
And he realized that what she was calling for was not a pizza and that she really needed help. So it's just listening. But calling 311, they take your information down. Once you call the shelter, a lot of them will help you out. If they don't have room, they'll call other shelters to figure out where to place you. And they will actually help, get you to that location. I know because of COVID, a lot of the shelters are closed, but there are resources where, and this is where we have to have funding. This is where funding comes in. If a shelter is not open, and because of COVID, a lot of the shelters have shut down. The shelter I worked at, we could fit 26 people in one room, and that was women and children. And we actually service women, men, and children. But once you get to a certain number of women, we actually, will take the men somewhere else. and sorry to sidetrack, but some people think domestic violence victims are or sex trafficking victims actually get put in domestic violence shelters, and it's not the same thing.
Where did they go? Like, how come? That's why I can't be no millionaire. Why can't I be? I would buy a hotel, or there should be a hospital. Why? If this is at the proportionate numbers that we're saying, why isn't there like one, place where they go, where they get intake? They get, their blood drawn to see if they have any communicable diseases. They get a CAT scan. They see, the detox, and then they get a warm meal. They get to take a bath. They get to,
and that sounds all great, Allison. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna tell you the experience that I had. When I tell you, the young ladies, some of them, not all of them, that I worked with, they don't want help. They want resources,
money.
So and it's not, everybody's not on the same level. There are some people that have that come to Jesus moment, and it's like, I want to get my life together. Help me, do this. Everybody's at different levels. So we need like emergency housing, which is like, okay, let's get you somewhere in so you can, you can sleep because you haven't slept for the last 24 to 48 hours. And then once you're sober, we can talk. You know what I mean? Sober of mind. But then there's others that are like, they're not even there. They need to be encouraged and pulled on, because a lot of them feel like, well, I don't have the skills to, get a job or do this. So we need actually people to train them, in regards to work skills and being able to build a resume, because
there's a whole bunch of stuff. Like I said, we need a whole
so many levels to this.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note too, and I'm going to say a couple of things. Is one, there's a lack of emergency housing. All day there. It's hard for us to place. It's very, very hard for us to place victims, which funding does present itself to be an issue. And that's why we need funding so that we can have things like emergency housing. But it's, and I'm going to touch on something Lakeisha said of sometimes it seems like they don't want help. And for us, it's always important for someone to be ready to start receiving the help. But what we see in the field is that it usually takes us anywhere between 7 to 9 points of contact and touch points with a person before they are truly, truly ready. And I'm sure Dr. Gettings can speak into this, right? Because there's so many psychological effects that kind of go into this as well. And so you have victims who are suffering from PTSD, you have anxiety, depression, you have the complex trauma that's at hand. And so there's so much manipulation that goes alongside of this that they probably are not identifying that they're a victim in the first place. And so you can't just say that they're a victim because that's also offensive. And that could be, you can be opening up so much more and triggering a person so much more by stating that they're a victim, right? So first, getting them to a place where they can be safe, where they can be, and not only safe, but feel like there's safety around them so that they can start even recognizing some of those things. Takes a really, 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 really long time, which is why emergency housing is really, really important. So, and then, go ahead.
No, I was just going to go kick that right back to Dr. Gettings because you hit it right there. I mean, hello, like this is not a one-off session with a therapist and a psychiatrist. This is some deep-rooted, long life stuff that happened to them, right? So what is your intake on like their mental health, the people that say helping them, the human traffickers' mental health, and the victim? That's a whole bunch of stuff happening.
It's a lot of stuff happening. It's a lot of moving parts. But the one thing that I think is really important when you number the amount of times that it is required to have a person actually accept that help. One of the reasons why
didn't she? Seven?
Yes. One of the reasons why we're trained in motivational interviewing and being non-judgmental and being empathetic is because there is a motivating process that has to take place. If you are coming in contact with someone where, for us, it looks like as the medical professional, this current situation is damaging and abusive, but you're meeting someone who most of the time has a long history of maltreatment, neglect, abuse, trauma. Okay. And so you're not just addressing this moment in time. So that takes a process. And as you mentioned, Lakeisha, the resources are lacking. Like, I'm just 100% going to say that. There's no sugarcoating that. Yes, in an ideal situation, a person should be able to go get baseline medical care, assessment, housing, clothing, and be comfortable, because that's a huge part of making the decision to leave where you're at.
Right.
Okay, because I'm leaving this situation that's broken, but what am I walking into? And what can you really, really assure me? And a lot of times that's a very challenging decision to make, and it is filled with a lot of fear and distrust. So I know here in Broward County, when we're in the clinic, one of the major things, I just have to share this because it just keeps coming up, but I want to say maybe 3 weeks ago, I got a call from one of our site managers about a patient who came in accompanied by a male who refused to leave the room during an assessment. Okay. And because of this situation, we had a discussion about our protocol and policies with bringing patients back accompanied by another individual.
Right.
We need to address this because once this individual was in the room, it was clear that something was not right. Right. Mm-hmm. And so now when we're trying to remove this person and you're asking the woman in this case who was being evaluated, can we meet with you in private? And she said no. And of course he said no. Right. What can we do in the future to prevent even being in a room with someone who is taking control of a situation and preventing our intervention? And as medical providers on the front lines of women, men, children coming in that need services, need help, need rescuing, we need to make sure that we have certain things in place. And we also just need to begin with an awareness of it.
Yes.
Because human trafficking is real, it's here, and it's increasing in frequency across this nation. So
what is wrong with a person that would traffic somebody? What are they diagnosed with?
Well, I think that's something that we need to explore too, because go ahead.
I'm sorry, both of y'all. I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of riled up. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. Because I'm mind blown. Like, when
I think I always go back to hurt people, mm-hmm. and not making things too complicated. So when you go back through the life of an individual who's exploited someone, they've somehow been exposed themselves to exploitation. I don't know how, but I would assume that in most cases that is fact. I think that there are other obvious profits from this type of a dynamic that would cause someone to pursue it. And then just thinking about the ability to have empathy when we talk about personality disorders and things of that nature. I mean, we know that everyone, going back to predators, right? What is the psyche of a predator? How does a person become a predator? How does someone become driven to manipulate, control, coerce, and enslave another individual?
Right. I 100% agree, Dr. Gettings. And even when we talk about human trafficking, when we say it is layered, because we go back to even what you said, Allison, about, prevention is key, and it is. But even if we did prevention in every school in America,
right,
and I'm gonna just go on record and say this, that still would not fix the problem.
No.
Why? Because there is a demand, and we have to address the demand. Aside from supply and demand. And it's not just the money, it's also the appetite for sex.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at the demand, we've kind of touched on the trafficker a little bit, and 100%, right? When we talk about traffickers, we have to look at their history just as much. And I always try to tell people to not demonize others, because we don't understand the circumstances that have brought that person to that point. Is it acceptable? Is it justifiable? Absolutely not, right? The selling of a human being is just not acceptable, and it's not something that we should tolerate. But we do have to ask the question, why? Why is this person doing that? And then we also have to explore the buyer, because we wouldn't have this if people weren't out here buying sex and purchasing sex. So we have to ask the question, why are people buying sex? And there's so many elements that drive the demand. We have media and pop culture, which is something that you had touched on before, Allison. We have pornography, the pornography industry. And I saw you guys had a couple segments on pornography, a couple episodes ago. So we probably don't need to touch on that, but already that is definitely a gateway to someone who wants to purchase sex. We talk about other societal factors, historical racism, economic issues. Like there's just all of these factors that are driving demand. And there's a community of buyers that also, I mean, there are people that we can demonize buyers all day for purchasing sex, but we also have to ask the question, why are they purchasing sex? And do they even understand the implications of what they're doing? And oftentimes they don't. And it all goes back to even what Lakeisha said, is that at the root of a lot of this, we're dealing with identity issues. At all levels, at all ends of the spectrum, from the trafficker to the victim to the buyer and to anyone else, even to corporations that don't realize that they're contributing to human trafficking. So,
like what corporations? Can we say it? What?
Well, I think
I would say,
I'm going too much. Am I doing the most? What? So we don't support, like what? When you say contributing,
there's an organization called the National Center of Sexual Exploitation.
National Center of Sexual Exploitation. Okay.
Yep, and every year they put out a Dirty Dozen list, and I would just direct you guys that way. So that you can
the
see
Sexual Center of the National Center of Sexual Exploitation.
Yes, NCOSE, Nicosi.
Going to that website.
And every year they put out a Dirty Dozen list, so you can see some of some organizations that are on their radar that they would like to change some legislation, and they go in depth into why these companies are complicit to human trafficking as a whole. So,
and can I just say one thing to that?
Well, actually, I need you to kind of wrap this.
No, because I was just going to say, and just in preparation for this show, I think as a clinician, my focus is more so on the sex trafficking aspects of human trafficking, but learning that human trafficking as a whole, we're talking not just about sex trafficking, but also with labor. And so when we talk about corporations that utilize human trafficking for their products and goods and that, I think we all need to be aware that human trafficking is not just sex trafficking, and sex trafficking is actually the smaller percentage of what falls under the umbrella of human trafficking. But overall, I think that when we talk about prevention, and I mentioned this to you, Allison, I got an email this week from my son's school.
Right, I saw that
they're doing a mental health awareness week, and one of the topics for the day here in Florida is human trafficking.
Amen.
And I think if we have more conversations with our children, so much stuff just starts at home. Like look, I grew up in a house with domestic violence and abuse and trauma, and it's just like, when you don't have that groundwork, when you don't have that stable upbringing, when you're exposed to chaos, dysfunction, trauma, and abuse at an early age, subconsciously, you really do in a lot of ways gravitate to that, or your radar.
Or you can become the trafficker, right? Like either or.
So to your point, going back to hurt people, a hurt person can look very different. A hurt person is not always someone who's exposed to being the person who's trafficked, but a hurt person could also be the trafficker. A lot of it has to do with our exposure and our protection from predators. Again, going back to that, because what we're talking about is a cycle of abuse and trauma and manipulation and modern day slavery, if that's what you want to dub it. But I think we have to do way better. I think it's really sad where we are right now. And just from what I see clinically, with a lack of resources, with a lack of providers, and just the lack of awareness and understanding, I think we have to do way better.
So I want to say something because it, like I mentioned before, we're going to show a little clip of the movie that my son was in called The Ring of Silence. And it was directed by Nicole Bowers-Wallace. I believe one of the best directors on the planet. She's going to be doing a lot of stuff. But what she sent me tonight when I told her we were doing the show, because Ring of Silence is coming back out. It was on Amazon. But right now, Ring of Silence, which has captured the attention of academic institutions, including colleges, universities, healthcare educators, especially nursing, and high schools, because of its realistic portrayal of human sex trafficking and how youth in every socioeconomic and across all standards of living are at risk. And she wants us to we're going to definitely put you on our website, Restoration, and any of the resources that we need to put that on our website. Stephanie, you're watching. And she said, if we can contact us at the Brain Truth, and we can set up screenings and panels. And I would love to connect you guys with Nicole and what we're doing with the movie, because she is going into schools and it's going to be shown around globally. And it's a really good depiction of these rich kids and poor kids. And they did a really good job of telling the story. So we can show that clip right now. And I think my son, who probably I think he knows I have a podcast. I think he's going to actually come on. He's one of the stars of the movie, Jordan Hodges McKinley. So can we look at that clip real quick of the scene of the lead and Jordan when they both started realizing that they were being groomed?
Antoine, what's going on?
You need to stop seeing that guy, April, before you get caught up too. Layla set me up that night. We had sex, and she filmed it.
So people do that, right?
She's 15. They're blackmailing me, saying they'll get me locked up on statutory rape.
Oh, no.
One stupid mistake.
I'm so sorry, Antoine. But Layla and Sean, I don't even think that they know each other.
You were raped, April.
Okay. So do we have Jordan? Is Jordan here? Is he in the building?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Jordan Hodges.
Hello.
How are you? So this was my son. So we filmed this movie in Flint, Michigan a couple of years ago. And we actually did a scene which was so profoundly powerful at that hotel at the end when they did the bust and they reenacted an actual scene. We were actually, when we were on set, remember, Jordan, we were in the rooms while they were setting the stage with actual police officers were in the scene of the movie that were returned to the scene of the crime where they actually busted a 4-year-old girl in a room with 7 men. And so tell us just briefly, your experience doing the movie. I don't know if you've been watching the show tonight, but how has that impacted your life too? Tell us about the movie and how's it impacted your life?
Well, for one, the movie was, very inspirational to some and heartbreaking. It was definitely a great movie to make. But during that scene with the motel, it just really hit differently.
In what way? Like this is real. That scene was pretty deep.
Yeah, physically, mentally, emotionally. And it just puts you in a situation that is very, very uncomfortable for anybody. I don't care how tough you are. It's a hard subject to come around.
And so how has it changed your life? I mean, do you've always been a smart kid. Of course, my son is amazing, but how does it change your life and your friends? I know you always talk like you're the leader of the pack, people, but has that had an impact on how you move and how you look around and
Oh, definitely. It's definitely made me way more aware of the situation that's going on at hand. You know, at first, of course, you don't really see it; you only hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me to do a movie like that, it's definitely made me more aware of my surroundings. You know, protecting myself, protecting my friends and family, and it just gave me a permanent outlook on life.
Yeah. Because tell us a little bit. You can associate with Antoine, because tell a little bit about your character in the movie and who he was and what was at risk here.
Well, Antoine came from a wealthy family. He was a straight A student on his way to the Olympics for boxing, and it's funny because I'm actually a boxer, so I could relate with that. And during the whole boxing process, there's some gambling going on, you know, the fighters, and eventually they end up getting trafficked. And I was one of those victims of the trafficking.
And your whole life they blackmailed you. So that scene was when he figured it out, that he was being mailed, and his life, his career, his full scholarship, everything. And so so I can't wait for you guys to re-emerge this movie. It's a perfect time on today when we're talking about national awareness for human trafficking today. And Jordan, thank you for just coming on, superstar. And I know you're going to be doing a lot of advocacy work with this and this movie. And you did such an amazing job. I can't wait for you guys to see this movie. I think it's going to appeal to young people because of some of the people that was in it. I think some kid, what was the kid from the famous show? Like there's some,
I think it's 13 Reasons Why.
13 Reasons Why. And like some of these kids, you know, I have to do have to tell this little funny story though. Sorry. But Jordan, so the movie was like a major movie. Nicole, you know, the director, well known, she's getting ready to do another big project in Hollywood. And they were looking for another kid to play this part. And because the other leads of the movie were like well known, big, you know, resumes. And Jordan, I had to put him, because, you know, I'm an acting coach as well, you guys, and his manager. And he took, how many takes did it take for you to get that one scene? How many?
About 60 something, I want to say.
62 takes. And by 61, he was cursing me out. By 61, he was done with me. But by 62, I think he really got it. And we started talking about the magnitude of what this movie's going to do, what this movie was about. And on that 60-second take, I remember him falling to the ground. And a scene they didn't even put in the movie when you cried and fell to the ground. And and then you ended up booking it. He ended up booking it out of thousands of kids and got that lead role. And so bravo to you, Jordan Hodges. I love you. I guess I'll see you later. Too. I don't know. But thank you for coming on and sharing that. Anybody want to ask him any questions? Anybody want to say anything to our superstar? Then I thought you were going to have your picture on here, but oh well.
I just wanted to ask Jordan, congratulations on your role. Did you have any knowledge of sex trafficking before you did this film?
I did, but not to that extent, you know. So once it was all said and done, I researched it even more than before. So
you kind of like realized the impact that the movie had more so after.
Yeah. Yep.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I just want to commend you as a fellow artist myself. It takes a lot to do a role like that, especially as a man. Mm-hmm. And you know, when I think of the challenges that exist within this field, it's one of those challenges is serving men and boys, right? So to have you represent that role is really, really important. And it is really impactful. So I just want to commend you, because not a lot of people would be willing to take on that role.
I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had in the photo shoot, which was not a like a dry eye, but it was all kids, Asian. It was about 10 of you guys who did that photo shoot, and they had all their shirts off, and they went and they had a person draw a barcode on their body.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was really emotional, you know, just even as a mom and all the moms, we were on set watching our kids get this barcode put on them, and being on the set and just some of the scenes, you know, where we had to literally shoot some of those scenes with nobody in the room. The parents couldn't even see it on the monitor because it was just too provocative. And we had the screening in Flint, Michigan, in this huge theater, about 3,000 people. And Christian, I can't think of her name right now, but she's the choreographer for Missy Elliott, and she came on and did a choreographed piece on human trafficking in the opening before we even showed the movie. And just watching those kids come out on stage, and some are victims who were victims of human trafficking participated in that opening, was just profound. So I really want to connect you guys. I think this conversation is not over. I think this is going to continue because we're getting ready to go into schools. We would love to take you Restoration 61 with us and go after this educational, this preventative, this mental health, everything. I think we have to do it. So thank you, Jordan Hodges. I love you.
Thank
I'll
you.
see you later.
I love you too. All right. You all take
All right,
care.
guys. So
Bye-bye.
before we go, I mean, this has been an amazing show. I want to, first of all, thank you guys, Lakeisha and Chloe, especially telling us your own personal journey, and Natasha, I mean, Dr. Gettings. I mean, it's always really amazing to have you on to give us some mental perspective. So just before we leave, I want, you know, you guys to just give us some closing words, like what's our next, I'm rolling up my sleeves, what we doing next, because what we about to do, you know, to make an impact and make a change.
Yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of those things this evening. You know, there is a need for prevention, and I have a ton of resources of great places that are already doing prevention and are in the schools, are in the group homes, and so that's a great need. I think maybe, you know, understanding the challenges. The biggest one is securing emergency housing. That is the number one challenge that any organization doing this work will tell you, is securing emergency housing is really, really difficult. So I think when you think of ways that you can get involved,
Yeah,
that's a way that you can get involved, right? Someone who is willing to donate a house, a home, someone who has the resources that can open some doors in that aspect. Another, and I'm always thinking of the challenges because that's where the solutions lie. And Dr. Gettings, you're on here, but addressing those clinical needs,
Yes.
that is I would say, aside from emergency housing,
Mhm.
we can't do this work without that.
Right.
yes,
We just cannot. It's impossible.
the emergency
So
housing.
so addressing those clinical needs, we've just hired a clinical director on staff. And we are going to be building out our clinical program so that we can just offer more clinical services to victims as well. So that's important. Again, addressing the demand. We have someone on our team who is writing up a program to specifically work with buyers. And so when we want to, as an organization, disrupt all the cycles of human trafficking. So addressing those needs, and then even taking these things to legislation. So we need more laws in place. We need more people at the forefront, because one organization can't do it all, which is at all. And so I would say, I always like to leave on a positive note, because this is a really heavy topic. And the good part about this work is that lives are being saved.
Yes.
There are more people aware. Like I said, I've been in this for 8 years. And I think it's a huge win to know that when I started, the average age of entry was 12 to 13, and now it's 15. It's not where we want it, because obviously we don't want an average age of entry at all.
Right.
But it is a small win. And so we have to count those as well. And like I said, lives are being saved. We're an organization here local in Illinois, and there's a ton of ways that people can get involved, so they can reach out to Restoration 61. I mean, we have hope bags that we can put together. We have, hotel awareness events that we do where we go out to
Okay.
hotels and we inform them about human
Wow.
trafficking so they can recognize the
That's
signs,
smart.
because a lot of victims are
Yeah.
going through those hotels, right?
Yeah.
So
What
there's
to
just
look
a ton.
for. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
what to
brilliant.
look for.
Okay.
And so
What
I
about
would
grocery
say
stores, owners and staff, that kind of stuff too, you guys do?
that's a huge part of awareness. So
Okay.
when we think of the community, right, we
Mhm.
want to make sure that the entire community is prepared for when victims of human trafficking become
Yes.
survivors and
There you go.
re-enter that community, right? So
Got
when
it.
we think of awareness, we're not just thinking of the local churches and schools. We're thinking of what makes up the community. It's
Right.
banks, it's the hospitality
Exactly.
industry,
Thanks.
it's government, it's
Yeah.
just all these
Church.
places that
Yeah.
make up
I
the
would.
community, right? So even doing podcasts like this, which is why we just really appreciate you for the opportunity, because
Yeah.
more people need to hear about it. And I would say the number one thing is just educate yourselves. There's a ton of information out there available that
Okay.
you can look up. And I'm happy to share those resources afterwards so
Okay.
that you can post them as well.
Thank
And
you.
you can connect with us at Restoration 61.
Yeah,
We're
we're going to
always
put
looking
up
for,
the how to reach you at the end. Dr.
yeah.
Gettings, parting words, and then I want to go to Lakeisha. I want you to look in that camera, Lakeisha, and I want you to talk to potential victim, honey, or a potential somebody that may be thinking about getting into this lucrative, horrible business. But Dr. Gettings, first you, and then I want to close it out with Lakeisha.
Yes, for sure. I just want to close by saying to members of the medical community that we have to do our part with recognizing individuals that are coming in, obviously, in a human trafficking situation, and making sure that we're doing the appropriate screening and educating and everything within our power to get them out of that situation. And as far as treating as a mental health professional, we need to educate ourselves about the changes that occur psychologically when an individual has been exposed to childhood trauma and been exposed to sex trafficking, sexual abuse. And I think if we do that, we will see a huge amount of healing. But it all starts with awareness, education, and prevention. And of course, I'm happy to be here tonight to meet you ladies and to talk about this topic. So thank you.
Lakeisha?
So I just want to say that if you know of someone that is being trafficked, and I mean, like, as soon as I said that, a picture in your mind came up, somebody's face came up. Do not hesitate to reach out and call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888. If you don't feel comfortable talking to someone, there is a texting feature as well. Text help to 233-733 or text info to 233-733. Do not wait. Tomorrow is not promised. If you needed a sign to change your life around, to come in and get help, this is your sign.
Wow. Thank you. And further information, how to get in touch with Restoration 61. I think we have the information that we can put up on how to reach you guys.
Restoration61.org. We have an intake line. And, just to be on a personal note, some of us have gone through some of the same things you guys are going through. So
thank you.
Know that the person that answers the phone is not someone that's going to be judging you. They know, what you're going through. So
thank you.
Just pick up the phone, call us. We have an intake line at 773-550-7239. It's on the screen. Call it. That number is available 24/7. Someone will reach out to you. We have a website. You can reach out to us. We have a Facebook page, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We do monitor those, and we will respond to the messages. If you know of a friend that you believe is, involved in human trafficking, whether it's labor trafficking or sex trafficking, or, you want more information, please reach out to us. We are willing to come out and train you. If you're a company, we're willing to, train your employees. We need to know the signs. We need to know what to look for, and not only what to look for, but what to do once you see it happening in your neighborhood.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lakeisha. Thank you, Chloe. This was an amazing conversation. It's not ending here. Thank you, Dr. Gettings. We will definitely continue this. Again, you can also go to our website, which we're going to definitely put a hyperlink to Restoration 61 and resources on human trafficking and what we're going to be doing next, collaborating with the movie and what they're doing in schools. And also don't forget to reach out to Inglewood Barbie. So that is wrapping up our new year. What is it? Episode 2.1. Happy New Year's, everybody. Happy birthday to me tomorrow. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Early birthday.
So
Thank you so much for having us on. We really appreciate you.
I appreciate you guys for being here. So that's it for us. And thank you guys. Good night, Brain Joes. We'll see you next week for another episode of The Brain Truth with Allison Jordan on intellectualradio.com and iHeartRadio station. Thank you.
This is The Brain Truth with Allison Jordan. Repent, renew,